Something happened in the quiet hours that the person you love has not been able to forget. It was not dramatic enough for anyone else to notice. No door slammed. No voice was raised. No sudden announcement broke the silence. It was only a moment, small, private, almost invisible, yet it changed the way they have been thinking about you. They were alone when your name appeared in their mind. Not because they were trying to remember you. Because they had been trying not to. For days, they had filled every empty space with noise. They kept conversations going longer than necessary. They stared at screens without absorbing what they saw. They found meaningless tasks to complete, places to go, reasons to stay busy. But that evening, the distractions finally stopped working. The room around them had grown still. A half-finished drink sat nearby. Outside, the last light of day had disappeared from the windows, leaving only the soft reflection of the room behind them. They reached for their phone, then stopped before touching it. Your message thread was still there. They knew exactly where it was. And for one breathless moment, they almost opened it. But something held them back, not pride, not anger, and not indifference. It was the fear of finding proof that you had learned how to live without them. They could endure missing you. What they did not know how to endure was the possibility that you no longer missed them at all. That is where their heartfelt message began. Not in words. In hesitation. There is something they wish they could explain to you about their silence. From your side, it may have looked like distance. Perhaps you wondered why they did not reach out when the connection between you had once felt so alive. Perhaps you replayed certain conversations, searching for the exact moment when warmth became uncertainty. But the truth is more complicated than what their absence suggested. They did not step away because you meant too little. They stepped away because you had begun to mean too much. That realization frightened them more than they expected. They had entered your life believing they could control how deeply they felt. They thought they could enjoy your presence without letting it rearrange their future. They assumed they could keep one part of themselves protected, untouched, ready to retreat if things became too real. Then you saw through them. Not completely. Not all at once. But enough. You noticed when their smile was forced. You heard the change in their voice when they were pretending to be fine. You remembered details they had mentioned casually and forgotten they had shared. You made them feel visible in ways that were comforting at first and terrifying later. Because being truly seen creates a choice. Either step closer and risk being known. Or disappear before the other person discovers everything you are still trying to hide from yourself. They chose distance. Yet distance did not give them the peace they expected. Instead, ordinary things began carrying traces of you. A song playing from another room. A familiar phrase spoken by a stranger. The scent of rain on warm pavement. A certain time of night when they once expected to hear from you. Each reminder arrived without permission, gently undoing the story they had told themselves that leaving things unspoken would make the feelings fade. They did not fade. They changed shape. Longing became regret. Regret became self-questioning. And self-questioning slowly turned into a painful honesty they could no longer avoid. One night, Someone close to them asked a simple question. "Are you happy?" They answered too quickly. "Of course." The person across from them did not argue. They simply watched them for a second longer than usual, then said, "That isn't what I asked." Those words followed them long after the conversation ended. Because happiness was not the question they feared most. The deeper question was this: why had they walked away from the one connection that made them feel most alive? They began remembering details they had buried. The way your voice softened when you were tired. The pause before you shared something vulnerable. The way you gave them space without making them feel abandoned. Even the moments when you challenged them carried a strange tenderness, because you were not trying to defeat them. You were asking them to become more honest. At the time, they mistook that invitation for pressure. Now they understand it was care. And that understanding has brought them to the edge of a confession they never expected to make. But there is another layer to this message, one they have told no one. Before the silence grew between you, they had planned to say something important. They had rehearsed it privately more than once. Sometimes in the car. Sometimes late at night. Sometimes while staring into the mirror, trying to make the words sound less frightening. They wanted to tell you that their feelings had crossed a line they could no longer pretend not to see. They wanted to tell you that you had become part of how they imagined the future. Not as a passing thought. As a presence. They pictured conversations that had not happened yet. Quiet mornings. Shared decisions. The comfort of knowing someone understood the parts of them that rarely reached the surface. They even imagined what it would feel like to stop running from the kind of love they had always claimed they wanted. But just before they could speak, something happened inside them. An old memory returned. Years before you entered their life, they trusted someone with a vulnerable part of themselves and were made to regret it. A promise was broken. A private truth was used against them. They learned to associate emotional openness with loss of control. You did not create that wound. But your closeness touched it. And instead of telling you what was happening, they became harder to reach. They gave shorter answers. They waited longer to respond. They acted uncertain when, in reality, they were overwhelmed by certainty. They knew they loved the way you made them feel. They simply did not know whether they were strong enough to remain present inside it. So when you began sensing the shift, you may have blamed yourself. You may have wondered whether you asked for too much, cared too openly, or revealed your heart before it was safe. But their message contains a truth you need to hear. You were not too much. You were simply close enough to awaken everything they had avoided healing. They know now that their silence may have left you carrying questions that belonged to them. They imagine you sitting alone, wondering why someone who once seemed so certain suddenly became impossible to understand. That thought has become one of their deepest regrets. Because you deserved clarity. You deserved a conversation, not confusion. You deserved to know that their withdrawal was not evidence that your connection had been false. It was evidence that they had reached an emotional place where their usual defenses no longer worked. And still, they said nothing. Until recently. A few days ago, they opened your conversation. They scrolled upward slowly, reading messages they already remembered. Some made them smile. Others made them close their eyes. Then they found one message from you that they had never fully understood at the time. You had written something simple. Not dramatic. Not accusing. You had told them that they did not need to be perfect to be honest with you. They read that sentence again. Then again. And something inside them broke open, not in destruction, but in release. For the first time, they saw how many times you had offered emotional safety without demanding immediate answers. You had not been trying to trap them. You had been leaving a door open. They were the one who kept standing outside it. Their fingers hovered over the keyboard. They typed your name. Deleted it. Typed, "I owe you the truth." Deleted that too. Then they began writing a longer message. The words came unevenly at first, as though each sentence had to pass through years of fear before reaching the screen. They admitted that they had been thinking about you. They admitted that the distance had not brought relief. They admitted that they had replayed the ending between you and wished they had been braver. But they did not send it. Something in the final paragraph stopped them. Because the message was not only an apology. It contained a request. A request they were afraid you might refuse. They wanted to ask whether there was still a place in your life where an honest conversation could happen. Not a promise that everything would immediately return to what it was. Not a demand for forgiveness. Just one real conversation without masks, excuses, or unfinished sentences. They wanted the chance to tell you what they should have said before fear spoke for them. Yet before they could press send, they received unexpected news. Someone had mentioned you. The person speaking did not know the full history between you. They referred to you casually, almost accidentally, but what they said caused your person's entire expression to change. They heard that you had been going through a season of transformation. That you had become quieter in certain ways, stronger in others. That you were no longer waiting in the same place emotionally. And suddenly, the possibility of losing you no longer felt distant. It felt immediate. They looked back at the unsent message and realized something that shook them deeply. While they had been deciding whether to speak, your life had continued moving. You had been healing. Growing. Learning to protect your peace. They wondered whether their delay had finally cost them the opportunity they assumed would always remain. That night, they did not sleep well. They imagined reaching out and receiving no answer. They imagined your name appearing on someone else's future. They imagined having to live with the knowledge that the most meaningful connection they had found became a memory because they waited for courage instead of choosing it. But near morning, another thought came. What if you did answer? What if you still remembered the tenderness beneath the confusion? What if the connection was not gone, but waiting for truth to arrive? For the first time, hope became stronger than fear. They returned to the message and rewrote it from the beginning. No carefully polished phrases. No attempt to sound unaffected. They wrote as the person they had always been afraid to let you see. They told you they were sorry. They told you your absence had revealed what your presence once concealed. They told you that they had not stopped caring, even when their actions suggested otherwise. Then they wrote the sentence that made them place the phone down and walk across the room, their heart beating so loudly they could hear it in the silence. I did not leave because I felt nothing. I left because I realized I could build a life around what I feel for you. That was the sentence they had never admitted aloud. But it was not the final revelation. There was one more truth beneath it, something connected to the last conversation you shared, something they misunderstood until now. A detail in your words had returned to them with an entirely different meaning, and once they saw it clearly, they realized you had been trying to tell them something too. They opened the message again. They added one final line. Then, just as their thumb moved toward the send button, your name appeared on their screen for a reason they never expected. And what happened in the next few seconds made them realize that the conversation they had been postponing might no longer be optional. The moment your name appeared on their screen, time seemed to lose its rhythm. Their heartbeat drowned out every other sound in the room. For a brief second, they simply stared, unable to believe what they were seeing. It was not the message they had expected. It was not the conversation they had rehearsed 100 times in their mind. Instead, it was a quiet reminder that life sometimes moves with perfect timing only after both hearts have traveled through the lessons they needed to learn. Their trembling hands rested on the phone as they whispered to themselves, "If I stay silent now, I may lose the greatest gift I have ever been given." For the first time, fear no longer controlled the next decision. Honesty did. They opened the conversation. There was no dramatic speech waiting for them. No impossible mystery. No magical sign. There was only the opportunity to tell the truth. Slowly, they pressed send. The heartfelt message they had carried inside for so long finally left their heart and appeared on the screen. I don't know if I deserve another chance to speak with you. I only know that I couldn't continue pretending that forgetting you was possible. Every day I convinced myself silence was protecting us, but all it protected was my fear. You deserved honesty from the beginning. If there is even one small place left in your heart for a conversation, I would be grateful for the chance to tell you everything I should have said long ago. Once the message was sent, something remarkable happened. Not around them. Within them. The heavy weight they had carried for so long began to lift. They finally understood that courage is not the certainty of receiving the answer you hope for. Courage is choosing honesty even when the outcome remains unknown. Minutes passed. Each second felt longer than the last. Their thoughts wandered through every memory you had shared together. They remembered the first genuine laugh that caught them by surprise. They remembered the conversations that stretched late into the night because neither of you wanted to say goodbye. They remembered the quiet moments that seemed ordinary then but had become priceless in memory. Those memories no longer brought only sadness. They reminded them that something real had existed. Something worth protecting. Then, your reply arrived. It was short. Simple. Gentle. I've been waiting for honesty, not perfection. The moment they read those words, tears quietly filled their eyes. Not because every problem had disappeared. Not because every misunderstanding had instantly healed. But because hope had returned. Real hope. The kind that grows slowly through truth instead of fantasy. Neither of you tried to erase the past. Instead, you chose to understand it. You spoke about the fears that had never been explained. You admitted the assumptions that had quietly built walls between you. You listened more than you defended. You understood more than you judged. For the first time, both hearts stopped trying to win the conversation. They simply tried to understand each other. That became the beginning of healing. Not because every answer arrived immediately, but because honesty had finally replaced silence. As the days passed, both of you discovered something neither had realized before. Love had never truly disappeared. It had simply been buried beneath misunderstandings, old wounds, unspoken fears, and unfinished conversations. Once those layers began to fall away, affection found room to breathe again. Trust did not return overnight. It returned one honest conversation at a time. One sincere apology at a time. One fulfilled promise at a time. That is how lasting relationships are rebuilt. Not through grand speeches. Through consistent kindness. Through patience. Through choosing each other again and again. Perhaps the greatest lesson hidden inside this story was never about finding the perfect person. It was about becoming brave enough to let someone see the imperfect parts of your heart without hiding behind silence. That is where genuine connection begins. Not in flawless moments, but in truthful ones. If you have listened this far, allow this fictional story to leave you with a simple reminder. Never assume someone knows what lives inside your heart. Speak with kindness while you still have the opportunity. Listen before reaching conclusions. Offer forgiveness where wisdom allows. And never underestimate the quiet power of one honest conversation. Sometimes the words we postpone become the very words that change everything. May your days be filled with peace that steadies your heart, wisdom that guides your decisions, courage that helps you speak with sincerity, and hope that continues to shine even during seasons of uncertainty. May you recognize the people who truly value your presence. May your heart find relationships built on honesty, compassion, patience, and mutual respect. May every closed chapter prepare you for one that is even more meaningful. And may love, in its healthiest and most genuine form, always lead you toward greater understanding rather than fear. Thank you for sharing this journey. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or reminded you of the importance of honest communication, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you don't miss future inspirational stories. Leave a comment sharing the one word that stayed with you the most after listening. Until our next story, take care of your heart, keep choosing kindness, and remember that some of life's most beautiful beginnings arrive the moment truth finally finds its voice.